In Tarot Historical Archetypes, we made it to the infamous Devil card, numbered 15. Of course, it's actually the 16th card of the Major Arcana sequence, and we're looking at the Marseille pattern, so the longest-lived version of this card. And you might look at that and say, oh, okay, well, that clearly explains the modern standard, the one from, of course, the Rider-Waite-Smith Tarot deck, which we are looking at here. Both cards, after all, feature a big, scary, winged and horned devil in the middle with two captives and/or demons chained below him. But those two prominent versions of this card actually differ, kind of, in terms of source. It's pretty interesting, and involves the entire and evolving history of visually interpreting the devil, since he was co-opted and pretty radically transformed by Christianity from Judaism. But in this video series, as you probably know, we like to start with, or at least somewhere in the beginning, touch on, okay, how was said card originally rendered? What were the earliest versions of this card? And in this case, the answer is, we don't know. The earliest surviving tarot decks are all incomplete and do not feature the devil, but we don't know if that's because he wasn't in the pack. Probably unlikely, he probably was, or because it just got lost over time, or because it was omitted because it was a little too scary. Remember, this was an expensive game played by rich, at least on the surface, respectable people, so maybe it was included originally and then kind of dropped out a little bit. But either way, just like with all the other tarot cards, the original cards, this wasn't some mysterious, ultra-esoteric visual symbol that was created by some minority or passed down through some secret tradition. No, they just tapped mainstream art when it came time to create the card. So that raises the question, okay, then what did the devil look like? Well, it depends. Early on in Christianity, he looked like this. Which one? The figure on the right. The angel in blue, that's Satan. Because, of course, Satan was a fallen angel. He was the angel that led the rebellion and took a third of God's angels with him. And that's why he doesn't have any of the sheep in this image. The sheep are on the left. He's got the goats. And remember that for later. But, of course, in tarot, you'll notice the devil does not look like a nice, normal angel, nor does he in a lot of art. Visual artists in the Christian era had a real problem with depicting the devil because there's really no description of him in the Bible. And in a way, it's hard to say really who he is in the Bible because there's different characters and different stories that get ascribed that role. For instance, the very first appearance, we would say, in the Bible of the devil is in the Garden of Eden, in the book of Genesis. But really, if you read that story, he's not called the devil or just even anything like that. It's just the serpent. Because the story that the Bible was tapping into was older, far older than the Christian concept of the devil as this enemy of God, who used to be one of his angels and all that. But regardless, you've got one thread here, one visual thread portraying the devil as a snake or anything like that, and dragons are kind of snake-like, so this bestial, snaky type creature, and that would stick around. Like here, where we see the devil as more of the familiar horned humanoid, but obviously being associated with a serpent. And in the book of Revelation, he is this multi-headed serpent dragon. And while these images are super awesome and fun to look at, they are not a part of tarot history, right? There's no snake-like, dragon-like devil in predominant tarot renditions, so we have to find another thread. And we might not be going in the direction you think, not yet anyway, because we can look to simpler folklore versus mainstream religion. Remember, in the Bible, there's no consistent description of what he looks like. In fact, there's really no description. So if you're an artist, you could look to local legends and a figure like this. This is a very early tarot version of the devil, and we can see pretty obviously it's a Krampus-like figure. He's speared some poor kid, and he's got others in his basket, and he's taken them all to hell. Adults or children, it's hard to tell, and I think that myth probably changed over time, this version of the devil. But either way, bon voyage. And where did tarot creators get this idea from? Again, from mainstream culture, like this stunning image from an early 1300s English Bible, so like a century before the earliest tarot cards. And God, that's a great image. No pun intended. And as you'll see in the description below, he's carrying his soul basket, and it seemed pretty clear from up above that those were adults, not kids. And so the devil is this ugly, scary demon wandering around at the actual world, right? Because that's part of the Christian myth. He's here, he's always trying to tempt us so that he can take us down to where he lives, thwart us from ending up with God, etc. And so I think we can see where this more folkloric, possibly originally localized version of the devil ended up in tarot cards like these. Now, only in the one on the left is there a basket-like object and kind of the spike or the pitchfork for grabbing people and shoving them in there, but you can see the evolution, right? Okay, at some point we lose the basket, here's the scary chimera-like demon walking the earth. But that's obviously not what really stuck with tarot, but if somebody wants to design a new deck, that's kind of a cool direction to go in and historically accurate. No, what stuck was this, but there's definite similarities here, right? We still got this composite monster demon with the wings and the horns, especially on the left, rhymes, if you will, with what we just saw, right? Weird body parts, there's a face on his belly. But the roving aspect, roving up on the earth, that aspect is gone. No, he's down in hell. Here's a couple of his minions. They're enslaved to the devil, and you will be too, if you're not careful. And goodbye to the one that's up on earth and literally drags you, adult or child, away. I think child in this version here, so, you know. Sorry, Johnny, guess you should have been a better kid. Listen to your mom and dad. And in both, we have these very bestial, gross versions of the devil. And that came about in medieval art. He's not the hot, sculpted male model, fallen angel of, in this case, William Blake, who Paradise Lost, of course, by John Milton, was a big part of pushing this aspect. Here's the super talented illustrator, Gustave Doré, I don't know how to pronounce his last name, D-O-R-E, doing the same thing, tapping into the same thing. No, forget the basket for a second, medieval art settled on this kind of a body and face, or faces. Here's a really classic depiction from the era we're talking about, and you'll see that the face, or sometimes one of the faces, it doesn't even have to be on the belly, it can be on the crotch. Yes, medieval religious art could get pretty freaky. In this next one, there's again something weird going on with its crotch. I'm not sure what. I'm not sure I want to know. But again, we can see this is part of the same overall template. He's a very strange composite creature. Notice the snake motif here, by the way, right? Because these things that we've been talking about can overlap. Also, this is a classic depiction of him sitting in hell, eating his victims. You get a lot of that in medieval art. And here he is again, obviously on the right, and you get the point. This is the tradition that was leveraged for the version, the visual version of the devil that was the mainstay, but not only entrant in tarot history. When did all that change? Well, of course, with the Rider-Waite-Smith tarot deck that we talk about so much in this video series. The one conceptualized by this guy, A.E. Waite, and illustrated by this woman, the very talented Pamela Coleman Smith. The only good thing about the Rider-Waite-Smith tarot deck is her art. I really wish she had gotten better instructions on what to draw. Because whether modern tarot enthusiasts like it or not, the fact is, for her, even though she was an occultist, one of the modern occultists, like Waite, this was just a job for hire. She just executed on his ideas, and his ideas were just off-the-shelf, late 19th, early 20th century occultism. Here's just another great medieval visualization as an interstitial, while I say that is why the Rider-Waite-Smith tarot deck has just way too much stuff going on those cards. But remember, we showed how, here's that card, how it doesn't seem to differ that much from its historical predecessor. And yeah, it doesn't. There's a lot of similarities here, quite a bit. But remember I mentioned early in the video, this, though, pointed to a completely different piece of inspiration. Kind of completely different. I'll explain. That's why he has an upside-down pentagram on his forehead and why he's holding a torch. And unfortunately, why he lost the awesome weird faces in strange places motif. Also the cool, dragony, scaly aspect. Also a shame to lose that, in my opinion. But anyway, what was that source? Well, it was this. The Baphomet. B-A-P-H-O-M-E-T. Most modern people would look at this visual and say, ah, yes, the devil, Satan. But its roughly Enlightenment-era designer did not mean it that way. That designer put his name at the bottom of this image, Eliphas Levi, an important kind of early occultist, like Enlightenment-era, Romanticism-type occultist, and he wasn't trying to create an image of the scary devil who will drag you down to hell, etc., etc. This is supposed to be a figure of enlightenment. Baphomet was part of the true, like the one ancient true religion, and yes, even Christianity being very much a part of that in his mind. That one true religion that kind of, had roots in ancient Egypt and the Kabbalah and the Gnostics and the library at Alexandria. slash Neoplatonists, just that whole very confusing and contradictory stew that is the central occult foundational story, that this true pure wisdom was corrupted or forgotten and kept alive only by this secret lineage that went from the Gnostics to the Templars, the Knights Templars, and then to the Freemasons, and then to people like Eliphas Levi and A.E. Waite, etc. But out of all of that, let's go back to the Knights Templar, because they were said to have been destroyed and, prosecuted as heretics because they were worshiping the real god and religion, and that included Baphomet. And circling back to what we said a second ago or a minute ago, no, they weren't worshiping the devil, not in their minds, right? So again, this symbol's not supposed to be something evil. This is enlightenment. This is a symbol of unity and balance, showing the equilibrium of opposites. It's kind of his version of the Taoist symbol, right? Equilibrium of opposites. Of course, it seems the Chinese came up with a much simpler, more elegant visual representation, what is commonly called the yin-yang symbol. Of course, it does get more complicated when you add the trigrams, as seen here, but certainly a less scary one, right, for some people, because some people look at Baphomet and just freak out. Satan. But then again, Baphomet does look a lot like depictions we looked at earlier in this video of the devil, right? So we're not going to get into all the details here. It's just ridiculously complicated. But there's Satan, there's Lucifer, light, bringer of light. There's the serpent beast, just this real melding of different characters and aspects into what is now thought of as the devil. And this overall character that eventually emerged was just like this black hole that sucked up all these different things that people wanted to ascribe to it. So that includes aspects from like the god Pan. Notice this article headline here, title, Farewell Pan, the Rise of Satan in Christian Imagery. Pan has goat legs, he's got horns on his head, he's horny/sexual, get it? He's animalistic in that way, so it's the opposite of what Christianity is teaching, right? This is no inhibitions. And he is probably the reason that the devil, who again is not really physically described in the Bible at all, ends up with horns. And legs like this, sometimes, including in tarot. Remember what I said way back at the start of the video? Over here we've got Satan with the goats. So we have that association early on, seemingly independent of this ascription of Pan, but Pan is a goat god, and he's kind of the opposite of what we're preaching. So yeah, let's throw him in their mix too. He's the devil, or the devil is now kind of like him. And that's probably how you get this association with goats and witchcraft, like here in this masterpiece by Goya. But someone like Eliphas Levi is not afraid of Pan and not afraid of sexuality. And so Baphomet is sexual, but again, remember, equilibrium of opposites. So that's why he or it is androgynous. The drawing features female breasts, but also an obvious phallic symbol. And he's got reasons for all the other stuff he threw into that image. An image that he says is a reconstruction of the god, a good god, that the Templars and others worshipped throughout history. And he called occultism true Catholicism. So to him, this is like the real religion and worshipping the same god that mainstream Catholicism was talking about, but in his mind, the right way. But yeah, that's why there's light in that image. Again, Lucifer, bringer of light. And you think of like the Genesis story, the serpent is kind of a Prometheus figure. He's bringing forbidden knowledge to people, Adam and Eve. And part of that is the pentagram. The pentagram represents man, and it's a good symbol when it's upright and a bad one when it's reversed, upside down, which is what Rider-Waite-Smith, what that tarot does with it. Here, Baphomet has like a torch head. So there's the torch. It's held upright. There's the source of light. Waite reversed that as well. In tarot, modern tarot, the torch is held down. And then the topper to all of this is that Levi was a huge influence on A.E. Waite, and that is why the Devil card in the modern standard is pretty much a combination of this here and the Baphomet. Or really then what you had, even though there's a lot of commonality and a lot of the roots go to the same places, all the historical, mythological, religious stuff we were talking about, what you had was kind of a replacement of this classic image of the devil, the Christian devil, the tempter down in hell, wants to drag you down there with him. with a synthesis of that and the Baphomet, so kind of the classic devil and the Prometheus Enlightenment type figure. And like we said, that's why the torch is down, that's why the pentagram is flipped. And so in modern tarot lore, this is still an image of, enslavement, temptation, addiction, but then when reversed, it's positive. It's getting unshackled, freeing yourself from addiction, becoming enlightened, illuminated. So it's a much more complicated figure in modern tarot, much more, and very easily misunderstood. I mean, this image here is probably the number one reason conservative Christians, mainstream society, etc., could look at tarot cards and say, oh, well, that's Satanism. That's an artifact that must be used to literally worship Satan, meaning Satan in the conventional Christian sense. And ironically, this card was not meant that way, although they did mean for it to be the devil, but just like the ancient tarot creators, this was still meant to be a symbol of warning, really, and not a, hey, we should worship this guy type symbol. Now let's do like we always do and check out some modern reinterpretations. So here's one by artist Erica Peebus, Peebus. I like how the two humans are kind of doubled over. That's one of the innovations in this take, but overall, as you can see, very faithful. And this next one from Astrala, it's a very minimalist take. Here's my very favorite one that I found, because I'm a massive Studio Ghibli fan, so you probably know where this is going. Yeah, No Face. And that is awesome. And it kind of makes sense, because remember, he was offering gold to everybody, all the other yokai resort guests, so he was stimulating their greed, tempting them. And temptations of materialism, that's a big part of how this card is interpreted. I love that. Some sticklers might call this a case of copyright infringement, but come on, this is part of the kind of overall evolution and appropriation of images that end up in the mainstream consciousness, in my opinion. One common theme, too, you see with some of the modern takes is death. So instead of two people or two demons, you'll have two skulls, or in this case, a lot of skulls. And in this card, and in the last one, that includes the devil himself being a skeletal figure. And last one, I really like this one as well. Kudos to this artist, well, to all the artists, but I really love the color scheme and slightly minimalist, a little bit of a bold interpretation too. So a lot has been changed, a lot's left out, which is fine, right? That's up to the artist, the creator, but overall I just love this style here. And that is it. Thanks for watching.